Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Football Funhouse. I am Kevin Cotillo. Sal Lito is here with me today. What's going on, Sal?
What's up, Kevin? I feel like I haven't done this in so long. I know you guys only did one episode without me last week, but I wasn't here for it, so it feels like it's been a month.
Yeah, it's been a while. It was nice. It was a nice little break from you. I'm not gonna lie. We didn't even hear from you much. You were off in another part of the country. You were gone as far away from here as you could be. Well, probably not far enough, but far. And you were off in the wonderful world of Texas, where everything's bigger. I'm told.
Yeah, turns out no. If you bring stuff with you, it's not necessarily bigger. I was in the bathroom and I was like, no, they lied to me.
It wasn't instant.
Yeah, that was probably the closest I've ever been to Steve, because since I started doing the show, I haven't been west of Pennsylvania. So
Sure.
Getting to Texas was as close to Steve as I've gotten. It was a good time. I did get to go to Cowboy Stadium for the first time. I think it's AT&T Field or something now it's called, something like that. Yep. And I mean, beautiful stadium. It's everything that people tell you. My buddy sprung for some amazing seats. We were 50-yard line. We were right down on the field behind the Redskins bench. I mean, we had all inclusive. It was a top of the line time and a great way to spend Thanksgiving.
So, fun fact: my wife, who we commonly refer to on this program as Falafel HR, for those of you who've been around a while, she is the human resources department here at our small little company, if you want to call it a company. She, when I told her you're going to Dallas for the game, her actual question to me was, "He leaves New York?"
Yes, why? Who needs to, right? Everything you have, everything you need is right here in New York. But yeah, I'm getting to travel a little bit more now in my life. I hope to leave New York even more, but that does cost money. So
sure. Hey, listen. You come out this way in Boston, and I will happily ignore it.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in Boston and Rhode Island since we've done the show, and you've ignored me both times.
Yeah, that's right. All right, so we got a lot to get to tonight, and this has been kind of a fun opening, but I feel like we should probably get to the news. It's not going to be easy to talk about. It's difficult. We're not going to get too in depth about it because for the sake of the man's family, I think we probably shouldn't. But
that's something. I thought Andy Dalton only hurt his thumb.
What? No. You didn't hear?
No.
You were on the message. Steve's dead.
What?
Yeah, he died.
Steve?
Yeah. Yeah, Steve that used to do the show. He died.
I feel like I'm being hoodwinked.
No. We heard this. It was in the text earlier. You didn't get that?
I saw a text that said, "My life is over."
Yeah, I assumed that meant he was dead. No, did I read too far into that?
Yeah, no, I don't think he. He went back to work after having 7 weeks off, and now he has 2 children. And
so he's not dead.
No, he's alive. His life just sucks.
Oh, all right, I get it. Feels like he's dead. Feels like he's dead. Maybe that was the.
Like his sex life is dead. His job is a dead end job.
Right, his family doesn't like him.
That haircut is awful.
Yeah, mutton chops went out a long time ago.
Yeah, his style dead.
Yeah, his fantasy teams are dead.
Pretty much dead.
Yeah,
you know what it is? He is dead, but he's breathing.
He's still alive. So, and the paleness sometimes just throws me off too, because he's very pale. His skin tone is dead.
I've heard he can't see himself in the mirror.
That's probably true. Right through, just right through him. No, Steve is very much alive. I joke, and probably not an appropriate joke, but whatever. It was fun. Steve is alive. He's got some stuff going on with the newly added to family, so he can't be here yet again. But I'm here to hold down the fort. Sal's back in the mix tonight. We're only going to give you one show again this week because, frankly, we're lazy. And as we get towards the end of the football season, that's kind of what we wanted to do. I'm sure we'll resume our two show weeks at some point here, but for now you're going to get one. So we're going to go through some of the news that came out this week. We're going to go through some of the upcoming games for the weekend to help get you ready. But we got to start off, Sal, at one place and one place only. You sent some tweets out there today. I know I'm excited. I know you're excited. Let's get everyone else excited.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I know a week that we'll definitely be doing 2 shows because we have to do 2 shows the week of Festivus. We will be bringing back for the 3rd year in a row a very wildly popular yearly episode of previously the Falafel House and now the Fantasy Football Funhouse, the Festivus episode. We all know that Festivus takes place on December 23rd, and we know that it is derived from a holiday on Seinfeld. And included in that holiday, created by George's father, Frank Costanza, is the airing of grievances. And we have made some funny shows in the years past, playing grievances that were sent to us by listeners of the show and by people in the fantasy industry. Last year, I got to listen to last year's show. We had Andy Holloway on, Liz Loza. We had Scott Fish along with Dynasty Frank. We had excellent contributions from Steve on this very show. There's probably people I'm even leaving out that were on it, but Jason Trandle did a phenomenal job. Zach Reed from the Dynasty Dummies. Oh, we had the guys from the Fantasy Tilt. Keaton and Nate, Fantasy Tilt podcast were on. Nate did a great one. And that was when Devonta Freeman fumbled that week, if you remember, in the playoffs and cost a lot of people semifinal games. So what we do is we ask you to send in a 1 to 2 minute clip of you airing your grievances about what ruined your fantasy football season. Maybe it was a player, maybe it was a league mate, maybe it was a stupid rule in a stupid league or a commissioner, something that got you bent about fantasy football this year. We want you to send it in. We want you to rant, and we will play them all on the air. And the great news this year, which I'm happy to announce, is we will not be bleeping out the curses. There are some Showcase 4 from 2016's episode that you could barely, it sounds like a hip-hop video just being bleeped out every 2 seconds because he cursed throughout the whole thing. So we might have to dig those up and play them unedited.
Yeah, we may have to do it. Maybe over the next couple of weeks, we'll send a few out there either on Twitter or we'll pop some into the shows here as we produce them. But I will say this, Sal, while we are allowing the swears this year, don't go crazy. Don't make it all swears. Try to throw some actual words in there occasionally. Just fit them in
where they make sense.
Yeah. So no, it's a great
from Dynasty Frank 2 years ago. He was very poignant,
very tasteful,
and he threw a Merry Christmas or Happy Festivus, you fucks, in at the end. It was very good.
It was very nice, very nice. It's actually the only reason we keep Steve around all year. His Festivus rants are very good.
He crushes it. I got to tell you, last year he sung a song. Kevin, you and I were both stunned that the man could actually sing.
Mm-hmm.
So vocal cords not dead.
First year was the night before Christmas or the night before Festivus, and it was a poem that really didn't do me very much justice. But everyone else,
your sexual prowess,
he did take a shot at my sexual prowess, but it was very funny. So
it was funny.
Great episode, lots of fun. We have a lot of fun doing it. So if you want to get anything in, it's Fantasy Football Funhouse @gmail.com. Send us the clip. Give us a little note about it if you want to. If you don't want to, that's fine. Just send us the clip. We'll figure it out. We're going to try and get as many of them in as we can. So get yours in early.
Festivus is on a Saturday this year, December 23rd. So we typically will do it the Thursday or Friday before Festivus to get it out there for the holiday. So we'd say get those in by Monday, December 17th. So we have enough time to, trim them, cut them, and get them prepped for the show. So still plenty of time. You may not have a grievance yet, but you haven't been knocked out of the playoffs yet either. So there's still time.
There's still time. Plenty of time.
But some of you guys are already out of the playoffs. So, and I guess that's going to lead us to the all-important Week 13 and the news and everything that's going to affect this big final week of the fantasy regular season, Kevin.
Yeah, most of the people that I know, Week 13 is their final week of the season. Obviously, there's a few leagues that we are both in, where 12 is the final week, and you're going already into the playoffs. Either way, Week 13 is incredibly important, and it's unfortunate, too, because this Monday felt like a Black Monday of sorts because of all the injuries and all the issues that we had. where do you want to start, Sal? I mean, we could talk about Melvin Gordon. We could talk about Andy Dalton. We could talk about Jack Doyle, Marvin Jones, Leonard Fournette, Blake Bortles. All of these had significant news and injuries this past week. I guess we should start with Gordon because he's probably the guy that is going to hurt the most. He's the one that's going to cause the most Festivus rants, if I had to guess. Right? Grade 2 MCL sprain. Will miss the next couple of weeks, a few weeks, quote unquote. They're saying he's week to week. I can't see him before.
Don't say it.
I'm going to say 15. I think it's week 15 he comes back. And the reason I say that is because it's against Kansas City. If both teams, win out, that is going to be an incredibly important game for the division. I think they're going to want him in there. So if he's at all ready to go, even close to ready to go, I think he plays in that game.
Yeah, so one of the leagues, and we always like to talk about the Falafel House League, the original main league here. And I have Melvin Gordon, and he was obviously my keeper. He's my first-round keeper this year. I lost Devonta Freeman to the IR. I've been playing without A.J. Green for 3 weeks.
That team is banged up.
Somehow, I am in a group tie for first place with you, and it is amazing to me that I believe that there are 8 of us with an 8-4 record. Is that correct? Or 6 of us?
I think it is 8. I'm pulling it up right now, but go on.
There are 8 of us with an 8-4 record tied with only points separating us for first place. And there are 2 people at 7-5. I don't know if the 2 people at 7-5 have noticed this yet, but they are over 200 points behind everybody who's 8-4. So we're not really playing for anything but playoff positioning this week coming up. The 8 people that are tied at 8-4 are going to be in the playoffs. It's just
so there are 6 people, or there are 5 people at 8-4, and then another 6 people at 7-5.
So that's what it is. So, but the math that I believe I did was the 6 people who are at 8-4 are in the playoffs. Because if you look at our points scored, there's no way that those people outside of Corey who can jump up, but he wouldn't be able to eliminate us. He'd only be able to tie us and move into playoff positioning. So we're in. The 6 of us are in. And
I don't know. I don't know that that's true.
I did the math. Don't you worry about it.
I don't think you did because
let's not do this live on air.
Yeah, all right. Maybe you're right. I think there's one spot, and honestly, I think I might be the guy looking out on the outside looking in.
Are you the lowest scoring 8-4 team right now?
So I am the lowest scoring 8-4, and it'll be close. It'll be close for me. But
this is the league where I have Gordon. Last week, as I've done in the past, you've pointed this out before, I'll make a move that I feel I got to make this move now because just in case this guy becomes relevant next week, I'll already have him. I won't have to pay for him on the waiver or fight people. We use a fab. I don't have a lot of money left. But the real reason I picked up Justin Jackson last week is because there was a chance Gordon wasn't going to play at 4 o'clock. And I didn't want to put somebody else in before that because I didn't have anybody really viable. So I said, Justin Jackson's there. Let me pick him up. Worst case scenario, Gordon's out. Jackson will get touches. He's not going to be Eckler. Eckler's going to be, in my opinion, the guy who gets the most touches. But Eckler's not built for goal line work. Jackson is. So I picked Jackson up. He's on my roster. And then when Gordon gets hurt in the game after playing, getting you the 2 touchdowns, getting you a nice 18 points for the day, you're excited. Boom. We're lucky because if you saw the play, his foot caught the turf but released. It was caught for like a split second and released. If it would have stayed in there, probably would have torn the ACL. He got very fortunate with that. But I am a believer, not just because I have him. Justin Jackson will be a player. I don't think Eckler's built to be an every down pounding back. This team likes to run the ball, and I think Jackson will be involved this week. Not to the tune of what Melvin Gordon does, but hopefully he could get a touchdown. And boy, I hate to think that Gordon's out till week 15. You're killing me.
Yeah, I think you're right. We talked about this. I was on the Dynasty Trade Calculator podcast earlier this week. I don't even know if it's been released yet, but one of the discussions we had
Insider exclusive
is centered around Melvin Gordon, and we discussed that. What would be the split? Izzy Elkifus, who's one of the hosts, thought Eckler would step right in and get an increased volume and be basically an RB2 at minimum going forward. Whereas myself and Nick Whalen thought it might not be that cut and dry. I think Jackson's going to get a lot of work because I don't know that they're going to change Eckler's workload that much. Maybe he gets another, an uptick in carries by like 2 or 3 or 5 at most. Maybe, he's not going to get many more looks in the passing game because he's already their passing down guy. I don't know that they're going to they can't really throw the ball to him more because then you're telegraphing what you're doing when he's on the field a little bit. So I think they're still going to mix in Jackson, and I really think that he could get a decent amount of carries. I think you're looking at 10 to 12 carries for him.
That'd be great. He's going to have to be on my lineup because, again, 16-teamer. I have him and Doug Martin healthy.
Yeah, I mean, if it's obviously this is being released on Thursday, so if your waivers have already run and he hasn't been picked up, go get it right now because if you're a Melvin Gordon guy and you're going to throw someone in, he might not be a bad option. We're talking about a 16-team league, so there's not a lot of depth. So like you said, Sally, you're kind of stuck. But I don't know that he's a terrible option depending on what your bench looks like anyway. So
yeah, and if nobody went and picked him up, if you're the Melvin Gordon owner and you didn't grab him because most likely Eckler was owned, I mean, what the hell are you doing? What the hell are you doing?
Yeah, you're not paying attention. Just not paying attention. Let's move on. Let's talk about the string of IRs that occurred. One of which, I know we never root for injuries, but one of which I know for a fact made you happy. Andy Dalton, not the one that made you happy, although I don't think that made anyone happy. He certainly can't help your AJ Green position, although it looks like he's going to play this week.
I don't think this guy Driscoll is that bad.
Oh, now come on.
I'm not saying Driscoll is somebody I'd be playing.
He's not even Andy Dalton, though, so you have to downgrade the passing game.
Both times he's come in this year, he moved the offense. Both times. And the guy can move. He's an athlete. He can run. He can make things happen. What I'm saying is I think the weapons will be okay. I think
we've seen that before, though. We've seen backup quarterbacks move an offense, and then when they get the start, it's a completely different story.
You're not wrong about that. You usually are wrong. I'm going to give you a little credit on this. But I'll just be happy to just throw it up there. Let AJ catch it. Throw it up.
I mean, that is the one thing I think you got to be hoping for if you're the AJ Green owner, honestly, as he comes back, is that, this Driscoll guy just sees his big target and knows his name and throws it to him, a ton. But we've also seen with backup quarterbacks, they tend to favor the guys they work with. So you might see some of those fringe options get a little bit more looks because he's comfortable with them. Guys like John Ross, who may have been on the second team starting off, earlier in the season and things like that. Guys that aren't, necessarily the go-tos on the first team offense may have gotten some extra work in with Driscoll, so he may have a comfort level.
John Ross is basically Chris Carter at this point. All he does is catch touchdowns.
Yeah, basically.
Every week he's out there, he catches a touchdown. I might have to have AJ Green and John Ross both in my falafel roster because your boy John Brown sucks again.
Well, he doesn't suck. The quarterback they put in there doesn't throw the ball, so that doesn't help. But the Cincinnati Bengals play the Denver Broncos, which doesn't help the passing game to begin with. And the guy I think that benefits the most from this Andy Dalton injury is Uzomah. Yeah, the tight end. I think given that he, like I just said, he was the backup originally coming into the season, he might have gotten some extra work with Driscoll. There's a familiarity there, and he's looked pretty good.
Joe Mixon.
Oh, Joe Mixon. No, Joe Mixon's going to see stacked boxes, and he's not really getting a lot of work in the passing game to begin with. So I'd be worried about Joe Mixon if I was a Joe Mixon owner.
You hate Mixon.
All right, here's the one that made you happy. Jack Doyle on IR. Obviously, we know why it made you happy. You don't root for an injury, but Ebron can finally be the stud that we all expect him to be.
11 receiving touchdowns, 1 rushing touchdown. But this guy was still losing work. I didn't understand it. He played a ton of snaps for the first time all year with a healthy, active Doyle. He played almost every single snap. Now, Doyle's hurt. Mo Alley-Cox didn't play this past week, and he hasn't been practicing. Coincidentally, Ebron did not practice today, but I don't know if that's more a precautionary thing that they have no healthy tight ends and they don't want him to get injured. But the guy.
So I'm looking at the note. A note here from Pro Football Reference says Ebron has a back injury. It is unclear if he will play Sunday against the Jaguars. I think that's a little bit misleading. I haven't heard anywhere where he's going to be out.
Did you hear who they signed today? Another one of my former favorites.
I did, actually.
Clive Walford, baby, who, by the way, is on a couple of my maybe even like a Koth roster, or he's on something like really deep where it's best ball. And
there is no way you have him on any roster. He got cut in camp. He wasn't even on a starting roster.
As you know, with a lot of these Scott Fish leagues and best balls that we do them in July.
Yeah. And
very early in August. And Clive Walford was in camp with, whether it be the Jets or whoever he was in camp with. There was a chance. And then there was a lot of rumors that he would be brought in with somebody. But listen, I'm not telling you to go out and pick up Clive Walford. That's not what I'm telling you to do. But yeah, I think Ebron will play, and the guy has been just phenomenal. And when he's been out there, he's been absolutely phenomenal. He had a dud last week, not this past week, the week before. He did put up a 0, but it was an odd game. But other than that, it's been double digits all season.
I mean, look at these targets in weeks 3, 4, and 5, 11, 10, and 15. And he scores 3 touchdowns through all of those with 180 yards, roughly. I mean, you can't argue with those numbers. The guy has, what did you say, 11 receiving touchdowns this year?
And the 1 rushing.
1 rushing, and he threw for 1.
That's correct. He did
so the guy's all over the place.
He's proud of all traits.
He'll be in your fantasy or falafel lineup, I'm assuming, this weekend. So hopefully you won't even need Gordon.
He's my only tight end on a roster, and I had to drop Vance McDonald today.
Ooh.
Who's also banged up.
Might have to go pick him up. Now, they are playing Jacksonville.
Hip injury. Jacksonville, who might not have Jalen Ramsey this week?
Might not. Actually, is he hurt?
He's hurt. He might.
Jalen Ramsey out?
Not
Jacksonville
out yet.
Jacksonville been surprisingly marginal against tight ends, considering how good their defense usually is. But all right, let's keep moving along here. Marvin Jones also heads to IR. Crazy. I don't know that anyone was counting on Marvin Jones too much at this point in the season. He's been out for a couple weeks. He really hasn't been super effective this year.
He's had a few good weeks. Early in the year, he was getting a ton of red zone targets, and he was catching touchdowns. Like you say, in recent weeks, he hasn't played, and in the weeks before that, he wasn't being very effective. I had him on a Scott Fishbowl roster. Those playoffs are starting this upcoming week. So in deep rosters like that with those many flexes, and it could be tough to lose a guy like that. I'll try to find some other way. But again, he wasn't producing at the level that he was last year. That whole offense right now is just kind of shambly. Kenny Golladay has been getting some good work, and that's about it's the only guy legitimately that I could see starting every week. Kerryon Johnson, got to see if he's going to be healthy. If he hadn't gotten injured, I would say he'd be comfortable putting him in every week. But that's it. I can't rely that Blunt's going to have the 2-touchdown game that he had, right? So it's Golladay and nothing. I don't even want to play Stafford. Stafford has not been good.
No, and you can't count on Michael Roberts anymore to get touchdowns. I mean, it's just
that was a good week.
It was a good week. Kenny Golladay does lead the team in targets at 84. Obviously, Golden Tate right behind him in second place, who's been shipped out since, but I think Golladay is going to struggle the rest of the season, and that makes me a little nervous for people who have him and are relying him on a wide receiver too. He's another guy. He's going to see extra coverage now. With no Marvin Jones, they really don't have anyone else to speak of on the roster. You're talking about guys like T.J. Jones and Bruce Ellington. And
Ellington also banged up,
but should play. But I mean, just there's no one on this roster, and we talked about it before as far as guys that you might be able to pick up after Tate got traded. We talked about some of these guys, and none of them have done anything since. Brandon Powell, where's your Brandon Powell?
He hasn't even been active.
So I think Golladay is going to see some extra protection from the defense, and it's going to be a struggle for them offensively the rest of the way. You got to hope they sort it out in the offseason because there is some dynasty talent on this team with Galladay and Kerryon Johnson. So you hope they figure it out.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, for this year, I would say Riddick is a guy you want to have on your roster for emergencies, because I think Riddick, he's getting targets. He's not doing a ton with them right now, but he's going to be a viable player at points in this offense. I would have him on my roster. I'm not telling you to start him unless you're really desperate with some other injuries.
So here's some other news that came out this week. The Patriots have added Rex Burkhead back to their active roster. I'm curious what your thoughts are on this as far as, we play in a 16-team league. I'm assuming I didn't even look, but I'm assuming he was already on a roster. Probably stashed. Yeah. So, but in other leagues, is this a guy that you take a flyer on? Historically for the Patriots, he's been solid. Not spectacular, but gets a lot of, high touchdown volumes, a lot of goal line carries, things like that. Good weeks, and then some dud weeks. But with Sony Michel there and looking good and seemingly okay from after his injury scare last week and, really being a focal point of that offense right now, are you at all interested in Burkhead if you're a guy, a team that lost Gordon and didn't get a chance to get Eckler or Jackson? And
if I have the space on the team, if I have guys that, are just useless at any end of the bench to fill out a roster, then I'm going to add Rex Burkhead, because you never know. He has had the successes you've mentioned. I think that they believe in Sony Michel. I think that they see what this kid can do. He's proven it just about every time that he started and stayed healthy through an entire game. The guy touches 100 yards, and scores touchdowns. So I think it's legit. James White slowly being phased out again. I mean, it drives you nuts being a fantasy owner of players on a team. But for me, Michel, who I had on my bench in a league last week, I think he's legit. I think that Belichick is going to give him the touches. So Burkhead is an ad if I'm desperate and I have somebody that's just sitting around that's droppable.
Yeah, I think the Patriots are far more than they used to using the run to establish their game flow. They're using play action as much as they possibly can these days. They're using full, the traditional whatever you call it, formation. There it is. Formation? The traditional I formation with the fullback. Is the traditional I formation with Sony Michel behind a fullback. They're running the ball more in the power formation as well. It's just, I think they're going to continue with it, but I do think Burkhead, for whatever reason, is like their favorite guy down on the goal line. So he's going to get those goal line looks. So if you're really desperate and need a flyer, he's not a bad guy to throw on your bench, like you said. Because if anything else goes wrong,
they're not using Tommy. I mean, Tommy's been. I've been starting Lamar Jackson over Tommy.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd continue to do that.
He outscored him.
Did he outscore him this past week?
He did by 1 point.
By 1 point?
And I was with 2 interceptions on Lamar Jackson. I'll tell you what, Kevin, I actually have Brady up on Fanball as my landmine quarterback of the week. Minnesota's been really, really good. Minnesota's given up 4 passing touchdowns total in the last 6 games. 4. And Brady has 3 passing touchdowns in his last 4 games total. He had a stretch where he had 3 passing touchdowns in a game in 3 out of 4 middle of the season. After that, the last 4 have been very, very average. He's got 1 300-yard game with no touchdowns in there, and then 3 games under 200 with a combined total of 3 touchdowns. It's just it's not the same offense right now.
It's definitely not the same offense. They're not passing as much as they normally do. They are running the ball more, as we just talked about, and their game plans just haven't really dictated it lately for whatever reason.
They figure out ways to win.
You would have thought the Tennessee game where they were down big would have been a huge Brady game. It was not, but I think that was more because of the pressure than anything else. Their offensive line hasn't looked good. They're getting some pieces on the offensive line back. They look better against the Jets, albeit it's the Jets. But the Jets have some decent pieces on the line. So, I think that they're going to come around. If you're someone depending on Brady or you've got Josh Gordon or Julian Edelman, I think these guys are going to be fine for your playoff run. But I saw some things in the Jets games that made me think that it's starting to turn around. We'll see. Minnesota's a tough challenge. And then, they have some other games that aren't aren't particularly easy this season. Against Pittsburgh, who's been a decent defense, I believe in week 15. So that's right in the middle of your playoffs. But then you also get, in the Bills, week 16 in the championship, if you get there, that's a tough defense. I know their team has been bad, but that defense has played strong. So
answer this question for me, all right? This week, Tom Brady against Minnesota or Lamar Jackson against Atlanta? You know which way I'm going. I'm playing Jackson against Atlanta.
Yeah, it hurts. It hurts me to say it, but I think you gotta put Jackson in. Here's the thing. I'd rather be wrong, and I think you're going to get points either way, right? Because I think Jackson's going to score against Atlanta. There's a chance Brady comes out and throws 303.
Yeah,
right?
It's always a worry. It is. It's a
concern. So there's a chance, but you know what your baseline's going to be with Jackson, especially against a terrible defense like Atlanta. So I think you have to go there.
I agree.
All right, let's keep moving. Speaking of quarterbacks, Blake Bortles. Can you finally become an anti-Bortite? The whole world has jumped on board.
Even Blake has. He came out
today. Blake?
He came out today and said he understands. He put himself in his position. He hates himself. He's an
anti-Bortite.
I can't defend the man any longer. And with that said, I can almost guarantee you a week from now, he'll be starting back at quarterback after Kessler goes.
It's Cody Kessler. It's Cody Kessler. I mean, it's not like he's going to save anything. He's not that good. But say what you want about Cody Kessler. He doesn't turn the ball over very much. He's very safe. So if they can establish the run without a guy that we're going to talk about next, then maybe he'll have a chance to keep the job the rest of the season. Either way, you can't depend on Bortles the rest of the season because even if he's back next week, he could be gone again the week after. So that team's a mess. We talked about it last week, I think, and I was saying how or maybe it was 2 weeks ago. I told you that this team was a mess. They were ready to just implode completely, and I think they've done it.
Yeah, it's been pretty awful to watch. 7 in a row they've lost. They were 3-1, and they're 3-8. Fired their offensive coordinator this week, I guess, just for a shakeup, like to send a message, I guess. But it's just not what you expected. I picked them to play in the Super Bowl this year.
A lot of people did, and I did not. I was very against that. I thought that they were going to have a backslide.
Guess who you picked out of the AFC?
Obviously, I picked the Patriots, which doesn't look like a great pick either, although they are in the mix.
Listen, they beat Kansas City when they played them. It doesn't, and now they've moved in to the number 2 spot where they are in place for a bye.
The Super Bowl odds, the most recently released Super Bowl odds this week actually had them as the number 2 team tied with Kansas City, I believe. I'm sorry, 3. They were tied for 3rd with Kansas City behind Rams and New Orleans.
Where are the Eagles?
New Orleans was 1st, the Rams was 2nd, Kansas City and New England both at 3rd. Same odds.
I tell you, I know New Orleans beat the Rams. I think if they play each other in the playoffs, if the Rams can manage to get home field advantage, I guess that's really more of a home field advantage game. But I think the Rams can beat them because I think the Rams do have players that can actually play defense. I know they didn't in that game, but I think that they have players that can.
Well, surprisingly, getting Talib back this week, if he comes back, or even getting him back soon, will make a difference. He's kind of a head case, kind of older. He's not quite what he once was, but he's a good corner. And it helps. It should help Marcus Peters be better. So
I'm sure you just described me. A little bit older and not quite what I once was.
And a little bit of a head case. But I don't think anyone. Honestly, I think the Saints are a real deal. I don't know. They may not lose the rest of the season. That team is good. Drew Brees looks incredible. The offensive weapons around him are amazing.
So you don't think the Cowboys have a shot tonight?
I don't think so. Good
defense over there in Dallas. Good defense.
So we got to get to the final news note from this the earlier part of this week that I had, which was Leonard Fournette being suspended for a game. He is, the appeal has gone through. It is finally missing this week's game. This hurts a lot of people from a fantasy perspective because he just came back. He was, going to be the playoff savior to a lot of rosters that I've seen. And then he goes and tries to close fist punch people in the head with helmets on, which I've, again, still never understood.
Yeah, a video came out today of him getting hit in the head with a can of beer. Did you see that as he was walking to the tunnel? Yeah, he got hit with a beer. Listen, when you're going to vote for the most disappointing fantasy player of the year, this guy's got to be up there. Le'Veon Bell probably wins it, but you had to be careful after Le'Veon Bell, and you should have had James Conner as a backup anyway. But Fournette got injured in the first game, missed a bunch of time, came back, got injured again, missed, came back. He's looked good. He scored touchdowns, 2 in each of the last 2 games. But to do something like that and then go and get suspended, obviously his mind is not on fantasy football, but to get suspended in the all-important Week 13, where some owners were struggling because they didn't have him for a good portion of the season due to injuries, is just, it makes him a borderline bust for the season. If you don't make the playoffs this week because you don't have him in your lineup and you have to go with Carlos Hyde or you have to go with TJ Yeldon, and they're splitting the baby, and the points are just not what you would have gotten if you had one Fournette, really sucks.
Yep. Yeah, it really does. It's just tough all around. It's going to hurt a lot of rosters. We'll see some rants about him for the Festivus episode. I can guarantee you that. And look, he's a guy that's not on any of my rosters, dynasty or otherwise, for the reason of the injuries. I just don't trust him. I don't like guys like that. There's a lot of risk involved with him. I do think you're right. Le'Veon Bell, you knew the situation coming in. I think most people thought he would play at some point. Obviously, that hasn't worked out. But for me, this was a guy that was completely risky because of the injuries that just don't seem to go away with him. And he has missed a lot of the season, and now on top of that, he's suspended. You're absolutely right about the disappointing nature of this player. I don't think I'll ever have him on a roster. I can't see myself ever drafting him. What about you?
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I don't have him on a single dynasty, and I have him on one redraft team this year, and that's the league. You didn't play in it, but it's that league that Will came up with where you pick a number and you get the player that corresponds with that number. So I was basically giving him as like a raffle, so to speak. I didn't pick him. He was picked for me. So, and that's the only league I have him in. So he's like, much like you, I didn't want to pay the price that people were drafting him as a, low end first round draft pick this year, like a wraparound pick with maybe Kareem Hunt or something at the end. And look at the production you've gotten out of Kareem Hunt and Fournette, who are going in the same area. And in a lot of places, Fournette ahead of them.
Yeah, crazy to me how high up he went given the history. Same thing with Dalvin Cook, just a guy that I would not have taken those kind of, put those kind of resources towards. So
yeah, that's why I passed on Dalvin Cook and grabbed the Freeman.
Yeah, it hurts. Hurts a little.
A lot.
All right, so that's all I had. There's a couple of other little news notes here that I have. I mean, Doug Baldwin held out of practice today. You want to keep an eye on that. I don't know. Anyone else that you saw this week?
Marlon Mack still in concussion protocol as at this recording, which is Wednesday. If you're listening to this on Thursday, so I would say Nyheim Hines is obviously the guy who gets the bulk of the touches there, but Jordan Wilkins is a guy who might be out there that could be picked up. I picked him up in Falafel today. That's who I dropped Vance McDonald for because, again, you get running backs. You need running backs. So Jordan Wilkins is a guy that could get a little bit more run this week. I don't know if he's a long-term play, but, keep an eye on Marlon Mack, who's been productive now that he's been back healthy.
Yeah, Gus Edwards, another guy that showed up on the injury report today, actually sat out at practice. I don't know if it was an ankle injury. It's a new injury.
Come on, bring me Alex Collins back. Come on.
I don't know. Alex Collins also still not practicing, so I'm not sure. It could be a Ty Montgomery week. Interesting.
2 words. I got 2 words for you. Kenneth Dixon.
Yeah, but I mean that offense is kind of a mess to me from a backfield in the backfield anyway. Actually, anyone except Lamar Jackson at this point is basically unstartable.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that.
I mean, if you have Gus Edwards and he's a go, then I think you put him in there. But other than that, yeah, I think it's unstartable. Let's see. Who else? Anybody else? I think that's it, really. Kenyon Drake's another guy you want to watch if he's a guy that you're starting. Had a good game this past week, but he's officially limited so far this week. What's going on with the McCown Darnold scuttlebutt, as Steve would say?
I haven't heard that Darnold's ready to play yet. I haven't heard that. I mean, I think if he's healthy, he's going to play.
Both were on the injury report today. McCown showed up with a back and a hand injury for some reason. So,
Webb Davis Webb. What the hell's his name?
Davis Webb.
Here he comes.
Webb Davis.
That's like a tennis player.
Oh man! All right, and the only other guy that you want to keep an eye on is Evan Ingram. Obviously, missed that game. Looks like the Giants may be getting in some hot water for that.
Cost me an important loss in a league this week.
Yep.
Cost me a very important loss. They announced that at 1:16 Eastern time that he would not play in the game if he was already in my lineup. And the next guy that I would have played over him was Cameron Brate. And Cameron Brate scored 8 points.
Scored a touchdown.
So this was in the one standard league that I play in, which I hate, by the way, but I'm in it. I like the people in it. So he scored 8 points. I lost by 6. So if they made that call before the game, they took Ingram out and put Brate in, I've clinched the playoff spot. I will now play this week, and the winner of the game that I play gets the final playoff spot. I'd already be in. Thanks, Giants.
Stupid Giants. What are they thinking? All right, that's it for news and notes, and we've already eaten up most of the show. So let's talk a little bit about the upcoming week. I'm going to start with the Thursday game because I just want to say that yes, Dallas has no chance.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they'll win this game either. They are home, and they have played good defense. New Orleans, can be attacked on a run, and the Cowboys obviously have one of the top running backs in the league. And Dak Prescott has rushed for 5 touchdowns in his last 6 games, and New Orleans gives up the most rushing touchdowns to quarterback. So what I'm saying is there's a possibility that they could win it. I don't think that they will, but Dallas is a pretty good team right now. They're not on the level of the Rams and the Saints, but they're one of the better teams in the NFC right now.
We usually talk about projections in the Falafel League as we go through some of these players. Drew Brees is actually down in like the 12th position, 13th position for a quarterback here, projected to get only 18.8. I say only, that's a pretty good total until you look at Cam Newton, who's projected to get 24.6. So are you down on Drew Brees? Are there other people you would start over Drew Brees right now?
Yeah, Cam Newton. No, I'm just kidding. No, most likely he's the top quarterback on my roster, and this is an important week 13, and you play studs. Unless I got a guy who's got a ridiculously amazing matchup this week, like who's playing Cincinnati. I'm not starting Keenum over him. Sorry. So, yeah, Drew Brees is in for me if I have him.
All right, and your boy Lamar Jackson scheduled to get only 17.4. He's a few spots down from Lamar Jackson. From Drew Brees as well. So Tom Brady right there near him at 16.5.
Sounds about right.
Sounds about right. All right, let's look at some running backs real quick here. I'm trying to think of some of the players that you might be on the fringe with here. Eckler, 15.9 projection. We talked about his role may not expand too much and how Jackson might be involved. Do you think he's, even saying that, do you think 15.9 is right for him? And if you're a team that had him that may not have had Gordon, but he was, one of your bench guys, are you immediately popping him into your lineup?
If I had Gordon and Eckler, yeah, I'd put Eckler in this week. It's kind of like Pittsburgh's roles have reversed this year.
No, I was saying if you didn't have Gordon, but you had Eckler anyway, does he make your starting lineup now? Is he an automatic start?
Does he leap over my typical? He probably has to slide in there as a flex for me. He doesn't probably leap over my typical RB2 that I've been playing, whoever it may be, whether it be like a mix-in or somebody like that. But he would jump over. He would jump over even Lamar Miller, who had a good game this past week. I might consider him over Lamar Miller because I don't know that Miller could have two of those type of games back to back. Chris Carson is the type of guy on that level. Carson's been doing pretty well lately. He'd be in the mix of guys like that for me. Pittsburgh was really good against the run earlier the year. They ranked number 10 overall, but in the last 3 weeks, they've only ranked 27th overall against running backs. So they could be attacked in that spot a little bit more on the ground than they can through the air, but I'm probably playing them at a flex this week.
So here's a guy I'm curious about your thoughts on. Lamar Miller, we saw have a huge game last week, 12 carries, 162 yards. Obviously, the majority of that was not the majority, I guess, but 97 yards of it came on one play. He also caught a pass for 5 yards and scored a touchdown. So he had 23.2 points playing Cleveland this week. He's a guy that I think has probably been maybe a low-end RB2, mostly a flex play for most people throughout the season. But Cleveland giving up a lot of points to running backs. I think they're the sixth worst against running backs so far this season. Is he a must-start this week?
I brought him up about being in the same area as an Eckler. I think you probably have to play him this week coming off of that week. Now, if you look at what Cleveland has done in the recent weeks since the coaching change and everything over the last 3 weeks, they actually ranked fourth best against running backs. They've actually turned it up with the defensive coordinator becoming head coach and probably getting a little bit more free run to run the defense in his way. But coming off of a game like that with showing explosive big play ability, I don't think he's a guy you want to leave on your bench.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I don't know that. Again, he's probably a flex play most weeks anyway, so I think you're definitely, this is a week where you're definitely going to get him in there with a matchup like that. So hopefully he's on your starting roster. Josh Adams. We heard last week that he was going to be a workhorse back and he was, going to be a feature back and yada, yada, yada. And then this week, the running backs coach, Deuce Staley, comes out and says, no, it's still a committee. We're still going to use everyone. And, meanwhile, Josh Adams has had 2 solid weeks, both getting a touchdown on both. Only 7 carries against New Orleans in week 11, 22 carries in week 12. His yards per carry dipped to, only 84 yards against the Giants, but he did get the touchdown. This matchup's not great. Washington, towards the back of the league as far as fantasy points given up to running backs. So what do you do with Josh Adams here?
Yeah, I got to imagine if I have Josh Adams, I have him in a couple of dynasty leagues, deep dynasty leagues where I am playing him. But if season-long leagues, I got to imagine I had other guys ahead of him that might have better matchups, right? So it's going to be a matchup-based thing for me. Those 22 carries, by the way, were the most since Ryan Matthews back in September of 2016. It's funny because I listened to both Festivus episodes from 2016 and 2017 today, and in 2016, part of my rant was Doug Peterson and his use of running backs. And 2017 was Liz Loza talking about Doug Peterson and his use of running backs. So when Deuce Staley's saying that, I saw something from Doug Peterson today where he said, we'd like to get him even more work. So very confusing, very misleading from 2 different people. I trust Deuce Staley a little bit more. He got banged up in the first quarter last week, and I don't think that many people heard about that until much later in the game or later in the day. And he was able to carry the ball more in the second half. But they have a hot-hand approach there. Corey Clement finally looked good last week. After they named Josh Adams the guy, Corey Clement finally looks good, Smallwood's still there. Yeah, I'm not sold that I have to have Josh Adams in my lineup yet.
On the other side of the ball in that same game, your guy Adrian Peterson has been up and down this year, to say the least. Some really, really good games, some really, really bad games. Last week, 12 carries, 35 yards. Obviously, they're dealing with a backup quarterback situation. Their offensive line has been banged up. Philadelphia's pretty good against the run. Not great, but pretty good. Definitely top half of the league as far as defending running backs. He's projected to get 12.2 in this one. I kind of need him to have a bigger week this week in another league. So tell me he's going to do better than that.
Eagles typically very good against the run. Over the last 5 weeks, 31st in fantasy, second worst in defending running backs. Adrian Peterson, I was at that game last week, as we spoke about. It was a guy I was down on for last week. I would not have played him in that situation. I would have tried to look for somebody else. I don't know that I could promise you 12. I'd say he could get close to 10. I think the guy that a lot of people are sleeping on right now is Kapri Bibbs. He has done the job well since Chris Thompson has been gone. He kind of is playing that role, and he's had some fantasy viable weeks. So he's a guy I would look at because the Eagles have given up the fourth most receptions to running backs per game on a season with 6.5, and they give up about 53, 54 yards a game receiving. So if he could have just say 6 for 53 in a PPR, that's 11 points right there. If he adds in a touchdown, he could be looking at a double-digit day, and I think he's available in probably most leagues.
His last 6 games, Kapri Bibbs, 0 points, 10 points, 5.1 points, 1.6 points, and 11.1. He has been the least consistent player, I think, in the running back position. He's had some good runs, and he's gotten some receptions, obviously. And he's going to be involved because they don't have anyone else with Chris Thompson continuously banged up. He's only projected to get 1.4 in this one from ESPN. I got to imagine he's going to beat that, but he's not a guy that I trust too much. I definitely would have Adrian Peterson over him.
For sure. I'm not arguing that.
One more guy I want to ask you about is Doug Martin from your former favorite team, the Oakland Raiders. It's a great matchup. Kansas City's terrible against running backs, particularly in the passing game, giving up over 750 yards through the air to running backs and 6 touchdowns, leading the league. Or not leading, but second, I think, in the league as far as receptions given up to running backs. And they give up a lot of yards on the ground and touchdowns on the ground as well. Overall, they're third worst against fantasy running backs. But does Doug Martin have enough in him after a big week last week with a touchdown to do it again?
Yeah, I think Doug Martin has life left in him. 2 weeks ago, he had a very good first half, rushed for over 50 to 6 yards, somewhere in that neighborhood in the first half, and then he didn't get a touch in the second half. I was pretty pissed because I had him in a big spot. I was desperate to play him, and I played him. And he still rolled DeAndre Washington. It turned out he had an ankle injury or hip injury or something along these lines we didn't hear about during the game. They kept with him all game last week, and he played well. When he's gotten the touches, he's done well. So he's definitely in my lineup if I have him this week. I'd play him over Josh Adams this week because his matchup is really, really good. So a guy we were just talking about. And at worst, he's a flex for me this week.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's going to have a good week. Actually, I could see this being a big Doug Martin week for a change, and he could get some people in the playoffs and then completely crap the bed the rest of the season, which is something that I would expect out of a Raider this year. The New England Patriots have been surprisingly decent against wide receivers this year. And I say surprisingly because they're usually terrible against wide receivers. They come in at 19th in half-point PPR against wide receivers. Adam Thielen is the top-rated or top-projected player on the board in ESPN in our Falafel League at 17.7. Adam Thielen's a stud. You're going to have him in his lineup. I was just curious what your thoughts were, given the Patriots have been better against the pass this year. And even more so than Thielen, because like I said, he's a stud. You're going to have him in your lineup. Really, the question comes down to Diggs, because Diggs has not been as good. Had a good week last week, but really hasn't been as consistent as he has been in previous seasons.
That's the word, consistent, right? He's definitely not as consistent as Adam Thielen. Last week, it looks like they made a concerted effort early to get the ball to Diggs. You saw very little Thielen early in that game. Then late first half and through the second half, Thielen took over and had a monster day. But Diggs had a very viable day also with, I think, about 80 and a touchdown. You're playing both guys if you have them. But I expect, the norm from Thielen, which is he's got 9 touchdowns in 11 games this year. So I expect, 100 and a touchdown out of Thielen against anybody in this league. Diggs, could get you 40, 50, 60, not the best, and then you hope for the touchdown. So I say you play him, but I can't guarantee you he's going to have the type of game that Thielen's going to have.
So with Melvin Gordon out, we look at the Los Angeles Chargers wide receiving core, and Keenan Allen's been, talk about consistent. He's kind of a picture of consistency for the majority of the year, at least the last 7 or 8 weeks, where he's getting you double-digit points every week. He's not phenomenal, but very consistently wide receiver 2 range. Mike Williams is a guy that's flashed at times throughout the season, but hasn't really been consistent either. Tyrell Williams, another guy that's had some good weeks, has a decent baseline, but then comes up with no points last week against. I don't think he played against Arizona, and then
so he was active, but he didn't see it play.
Yeah. So and then only 3 points the week before that against Denver. So, but do you expect some more volume in the passing game for them, given Gordon's going to be out?
Yes. The guy you saw getting the work last week with Terrell Williams, that was Travis Benjamin. Mike Williams had the 2 touchdowns. I was actually kind of mad at myself because in the SFB, I got Mike Williams, and I was like, once they announced Terrell Williams was playing, I'm like, all right, I'm not going to play him. I should have anyway because Williams was banged up, Tyrell was banged up, and he ended up getting not a lot of play. But I don't know that their offense rather changes a lot. It's a pass-heavy offense, even though Gordon is good there because Gordon and Eckler are both involved in the passing offense. So the tight end's not as much this year. They haven't had a lot to rely on there. But no, I think that it'll stay pretty much the same, maybe a little bit of an uptick in the passing game. I don't think it changes a ton.
We've seen DJ Moore start to really, round into a first-round wide receiver that he has been over the last couple of weeks. He's got 15 catches, over 240 yards, and a touchdown. You're talking about, 39 fantasy points over that span. Devin Funchess has been banged up. He may not play in this game. Curtis Samuel showed up on the injury report again today, although he's been fairly effective. We talked about Cam Newton being the highest ranked or projected quarterback. DJ Moore projected to get only 12.3 fantasy points. I got to imagine, obviously we know that Christian McCaffrey is kind of the straw that stirs the drink in that offense right now. But I got to imagine that if they think Cam Newton's going to be the guy, then you got to see some production out of DJ Moore too.
Yeah, obviously the first 2 guys in that offense for me are McCaffrey and then most likely Olsen. But Olsen is not what he once was. And Moore has been getting a ton of work. Moore and Samuel have looked – this is the future of that team. Funchess is a free agent. He'll be gone after this year. This is the future of that team. Small, quick receivers, and that includes Christian McCaffrey. And, DJ Moore is in my lineup right now every week, especially against one of the worst teams at defending wide receivers on the season. Tampa Bay has just been an absolute goldmine for wide receivers to play against this year. Kevin, I think you're on mute, buddy.
I hate it when I do that crap. All right. As we mentioned, AJ Green says he's good to go. Obviously, you want to keep an eye on him to make sure he actually does play. He's got a matchup against the Denver Broncos, who have not been what they once were against wide receivers. Used to be that you played Denver and you basically didn't start any wide receivers, although they are still pretty decent. Middle of the pack at this point. But are you getting AJ Green usually is one of your stud, but we're talking about a backup quarterback, a guy coming off an injury. Is he a lock to be in your lineup if he plays?
Depends on how deep my league is, right? So if I'm in a 10 to 12 team league, then I could probably find a guy that maybe for a week I'm a little bit comfortable with, unless I'm desperate for a week 13 win to get into the playoffs. I might have a team where I'm already in. It's just a matter of playoff positioning. Denver, over the last 3 weeks, they've given up the most total receptions or most average receptions per game to wide receivers and the most total receiving yards per game to wide receivers. So in recent weeks specifically, they have not been what they once were. more than likely I have him in there, but again, it's all roster dependent. But it's a big week.
Yeah, it is a big week. I'd be really hesitant to get him in there, to be honest with you. It'd be a tough one for me. You've probably, if you've gotten the last couple of weeks, you've gone through without him. Maybe you did that because you had a good start to the season with him and you weren't that far behind. But I don't know. It would be tough for me. Let's move over to, before we move on to tight ends and then wrap this up, the Chicago Bears is an offense that has been very good of late, pretty much all season. Last week against the Lions, we saw Trey Burton with 7 targets, Taylor Gabriel with 8 targets, and Allen Robinson with only 4 targets, 2 catches, and 37 yards. That's pretty bad when you're talking about a guy that should be locked in as a wide receiver too, or at least we thought coming into the season, right? Thought that would be kind of the floor for him. He's projected to get 10.1 points in this one against the New York Giants, who, really haven't been great all season against any particular thing, but they are pretty decent against they've turned it on as of late and are pretty decent against wide receivers. What are you doing with Allen Robinson? Are you concerned about him going forward, or is he a lock in your lineup going into these playoffs?
He's not a lock. He hasn't been a lock for me all season in my lineups. Again, and I don't own him anywhere in redraft this year. It was a guy I specifically said I was lower on than most people, but who's quarterbacking? Trubisky ended up getting a limited practice in today after they announced that he didn't practice. It came out late that he did actually practice. But if Chase Daniel's in there, then do I expect that Chase Daniel's more comfortable with Burton and Gabriel, who are the short yardage guys that a backup quarterback will typically be, comfortable dumping the ball off to? So I think it's quarterback dependent. If Trubisky's in there, I think I'm a little bit higher on Allen Robinson. But if Chase Daniel's in there, I might be looking somewhere else.
Yeah, I don't know if I could start Robinson in a critical matchup with Chase Daniels. Daniels actually had a decent game. He just didn't look great, and he, statistically, the game ended up okay from a fantasy perspective. I just don't know if he knows where he's gonna throw the ball. You're not going to see a heavy amount of targets for Allen Robinson. He's a guy I would definitely consider benching this week. All right, let's talk tight ends really quickly before we wrap this up and get out of here. The Carolina Panthers are giving up the most points to opposing tight ends. Cameron Brate, as you mentioned, caught a touchdown pass last week, but really only had 3 receptions for 26 yards. This is a guy that Brate has been pretty much throughout his career, right? Even before they had O.J. Howard. He's kind of a touchdown-dependent tight end, as most tight ends are. You think this is a quality matchup for him that you're going to definitely get him in there?
Yeah, I mean, they've been terrible against the tight ends. There was a point there where they were giving up basically at minimum a touchdown a game for like 5 weeks in a row. They gave up multiples in a couple of games. I think that's the team that Michael Roberts scored 2 touchdowns against, if I'm not mistaken, a little while back. But they gave up 2 to somebody recently. But yeah, I got to have Brate in there. He's an excellent security blanket for the tight ends, for the quarterbacks there in Tampa, and he came right back in last week as a starter and just basically fell right back into place.
All right, who else is on your tight end list for this week? Who do you got? I mean, anything? You're obviously a writer at fanball.com. Have you written about tight ends this week? Any landmines? Any sleepers?
The tight ends we usually do, we release for Saturday. A sneaky guy, the Cincinnati Bengals at 31st this year against tight ends. This guy Lacoste caught a touchdown last week. Hireman's out for the season. So if you're absolutely desperate, if you lost a tight end somewhere, if you had Jack Doyle and Eric Ebron's already gone, this guy Lacoste is someone you could take a peek at. Tampa Bay themselves are not very good against tight ends, 30th in the league this year in defending tight ends. So Greg Olsen obviously is someone you're comfortable with. Jared Cook, all year I keep going, he can't keep it up. He can't, but he does. I've had him in dynasty leagues where I haven't been playing him, and then recently I'm like, I got to put the guy in there because it's been pretty consistent, so don't give up on him yet. And more of the same, the guys that we rely on every week. I don't know if there's too many other surprises out there. I got a little excited about Nick Vannett for a little while, and that went away. That's pretty much it. Njoku's looked pretty good since the whole offense looked better in Cleveland since Hugh Jackson went and ruined the offense in Cincinnati.
Tight end is such a wasteland. It is embarrassing. What are we doing talking about guys like Matt Lacoste? I mean, come on. And you're right. I'm not arguing with you. It's just I know. What a world. All right, that's going to do it for us tonight. I want to thank. Yeah, right. Gronk's the 5th projected tight end on ESPN right now, so that should tell you something about what they expect out of him this week. That's going to do it for us tonight, or whenever you're listening to this episode of the Fantasy Football Funhouse podcast. We want to thank you for listening to us. We want to hope that Steve recovers from his death quickly and comes back to us. And I want to remind everyone to follow us on all forms of social media. You can follow us at FF Funhouse on Twitter. You can check us out on the interwebs at fantasyfootballfunhouse.com. You can get us pretty much anywhere you can possibly think of. Just type in Fantasy Football Funhouse and you will find us. Sal, what do you have for a finishing thought tonight?
Well, you can also find us on the Gridiron Experts networks, gridironexperts.com. We are there. We're on their podcast feed. We're up on their website, and you can go to their website for all your Week 13 needs, the absolute crucial week in the fantasy football regular season, everything you need to help you set your lineups and make the smart play. And if you are already eliminated, they got stuff there for DFS as well. So go there and try to win some money playing DFS because you suck so bad. You did not win it at season-long fantasy this year. Remind you one more time about the Fantasy Football Funhouse Festivus episode this year. Get your entries in. Guys, this is a lot of fun. And don't think that yours won't get played if you send it in. We play every single entry. If we got to put out a double episode this year, we'll do it because we want to play every single entry that we get. It's a lot of fun. If you've never been on a podcast, you get to hear yourself on a podcast. Send it out. There's something, even if you had a great season, there's somebody somewhere in your league or player that pissed you off this year, and we want you to air your grievances about it. So get them in fantasyfootballfunhouse@gmail.com.
Who do we get to do the feats of strength against Steve this year? I would say think we should go with. Yeah, Posey's not a bad. That's a good call. As long as it's not Chocolate L, because I don't think he'd hurt him at this point.
So that was sad. I was actually sad watching that. Thank God I streamed it for free and didn't pay for it. That was Chucky.
All right, before we get out of here, my final thoughts. First off, before I get to the charity thing, which I always mention, add a charitable playing aspect to your fantasy football experience. But before I get to that, what are you doing, Washington? What are you doing bringing that jackass into your team? Why? Why would any team sign someone that is now involved in another domestic violence incident? Whether it pans out or not, this is now the third. The third. It is absolutely ridiculous that anyone signed him to anything. He should be just, oh my God.
Did you see that they said that they spoke to the other Alabama players? And two of those Alabama players came out today and said they did not speak to us before they signed him.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous. And obviously he goes on the league, the league's non-exempt list or whatever it is. It's just a bunch of crap. He shouldn't have a job, and everyone knows he shouldn't have a job. It's embarrassing that someone signed him. So screw you, Washington Redskins. You guys are idiots and assholes. Having said that, add some charity to your fantasy playing experience. Offset all the evil work that the Washington Redskins are doing by doing something good with your fantasy playing. We'll be back next week.
Force Daniel Snyder to donate money.
There you go. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Fantasy Football Funhouse. And until then, take it easy.